Welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network, coming to you from the TeacherCast studios since 2011. Join us each week as we bring you the latest educational news, EdTech updates, and hottest interviews with today's most influential leaders in education. And now, for your host, Jeff Bradbury.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury, and welcome to Digital Learning Today. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about an extremely important topic, one that isn't talked about so often at conferences: cyber security. How can we keep our school districts safe? What can we look out for? What types of applications do we need to have running? And how can we make sure that it doesn't happen to us? Today, I have an amazing guest on, an expert in the field. I want to welcome onto the show Mr. Christopher Cleveland. Chris, how are you today? Welcome to TeacherCast.
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get involved in this topic?
Well, actually, like you, I'm an entrepreneur. I was studying machine learning in graduate school, and I read a paper about using machine learning to detect phishing pages. And I was kind of curious because I didn't know much about cybersecurity. I really started this as an outsider, but I knew what phishing was. It's kind of a fake web page there to steal your credentials. It turns out that this is how over 90% of major data breaches that we hear about on the news, and indeed that are affecting school districts around the country, they start with a real simple phishing email. So I was a student in graduate school, as it turns out. When I started the company, I won a pitch contest. I bought a plane ticket to one of the biggest cybersecurity conferences in the world just to educate myself. It's called Black Hat. Talked to all the vendors in the space about phishing, what they were doing to solve it. I realized that you could use AI to build out a proactive solution. That's a little bit of the origin story. And over the time, I've really fallen in love with the space. The kind of outcomes we can prevent with great technology really is inspiring when you just consider what happens when there's a major data breach or a ransomware event. But that's a little bit about how I got started. I stumbled into it as an entrepreneur and just found that this was a space where AI could create really a ton of value.
Now, let's see if we can dive into this topic a little bit at a time here. Let's see if we can maybe do some definitions of things. A lot of people hear the term cyber attack, but they're not exactly sure what it means. I would imagine there's a lot of different ways that it can be defined. How do you define the term cyber attack?
Well, I would think about the digital assets that are valuable from the perspective of a school district or from the perspective of an organization, and think about what it takes to make sure that that data doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Or I would think about maybe if I'm a hospital, what are my mission critical systems that must not go down? Like if these systems go down, it could cause loss of life, right? Because it might be a life support system or critical infrastructure, things like that. Digital data and systems that need to remain reliable, accessible, and in the case of data, private. You don't want it in the hands of the wrong people. So it's kind of a broad sweeping definition there. But certainly in the context of schools, you can think about sensitive student data or household type data, making sure that that stays private, confidential, doesn't get leaked out there, making sure that we're protecting student identities from hackers that want to use them to open up fake bank accounts, credit scores, that kind of thing.
So when we're talking about school districts and data, are people attacking the actual district and its infrastructure, or are they going after Google and PowerSchool and other applications that actually hold the data? Where is the attack actually moving towards?
So I would think about the staff at a school that have access to sensitive student data. These are the people that are really the targets. So that could be an administrator that has records about suspension records, pregnancy records, psychiatric holds, healthcare data about students. I mean, there's stuff in there about income, housing, custody status, very, very sensitive data. Someone's going to try and hack their email accounts and use that to access whatever systems they're using, whatever applications they're using to store that data. That would be an example, right, of what hackers are targeting in the context of a school district. And unfortunately, the way this game works is for the hackers, for the adversaries, the more sensitive the data, the higher price they can charge not to leak it out, right? That tends to be how this works. The more sensitive it is, the higher price people are willing to pay. So you really want to protect those digital assets, identify what they are, and honestly, take the efforts to create awareness and train those people that have access to those types of records, if that makes sense.
Now, if you are in charge of a school district and you are looking to make sure that your district is safe, is this a one-stop experiment that you would want to do, or is this something that you need to be working with, again, your Googles, your Microsofts, your all those different applications? What does somebody need to do to actually make sure that everything is how it needs to be?
Well, it's definitely a function of budget, right? If there's an IT, if there's a security budget, right, we can buy all of Microsoft's security products and programs. But I would really, at a fundamental level, ask the question, what are the most sensitive digital assets that as a school we need to protect? Who are the individuals that access those resources, and really invest in awareness and training efforts for those people? There's training and awareness companies like KnowBe4, for example, that you can use who can train key staff like that. So you can invest in, like, for example, without a shameless plug, right? We make an AI powered browser extension to protect users from links that they actually click on in the browser. So there's a number of measures that you can take to protect yourself as a school. Also just very practical things, right? Like if students graduate, delete their records, right? Like if somebody, if there's a data breach and somebody has data about a student who's not there anymore, maybe about a drug history or something very sensitive like that, that can be used even if this is many years later and they've totally overcome that kind of a thing. So also just be practical about the data that you are maintaining and storing after students leave. So those are a few things that folks can do. Multi-factor authentication, right? So that's making sure that particularly administrators, they are logging into sensitive applications with not just a password, but also using an authentication code that's going to their phone. So multi-factor authentication is also always a good idea.
Now, clearly, this is an important topic for every single school district out there. And I know that you said that you identified that this is being a big need for K-12. Talk to us a little bit about the company that you founded and how you are currently helping out school districts across the country.
Yeah, we make a low-cost, easy-to-use, AI-powered browser extension. And what this browser extension is doing, it's a plugin. So it plugs into your Chrome browser, your Firefox browser, whatever environment you're in. It protects students and staff from phishing links that they click on. So remember, a phishing link is something that's designed to steal passwords, steal identities. And we like to talk about our technology as the last line of defense, right? When everything's failed, when your Microsofts have failed, and when even any awareness efforts have failed, somebody clicks on a phishing link, our AI-powered browser extension will protect users right there in the browser when they actually open up that link. So we are a broad cybersecurity company, but K-12 is really where we have some of our biggest traction. We serve some of the biggest school districts in the country. Some of them hundreds of thousands of students and staff. And, we'll deploy this browser extension and, we see results within like a day. We have officials, payroll administrators, everybody from vice principals to students. We see actual phishing links getting clicked. And fortunately, we are on the prevention side of the equation. In other words, when we stop something, fortunately, we protect users from giving away their identities, giving away their passwords. But because that's where we are in the browser, we're where the rubber hits the road. In other words, we're where the adversaries and their victims are meeting, right, when they click on that link in a browser. And because of that, because we have these browser extensions deployed, we have insights into the kind of activities, into the kind of things adversaries are doing today to target our U.S. school districts. So we're fundamentally a company that's here to protect identities and protect organizations' data, prevent ransomware. But because we do that, we also discover interesting things about the threat landscape. And of course, we try to make different stakeholders aware of that as well through some of our research, and some of the work we do in public.
If any school district is looking to get more information, what's the website address that we can go to visit?
PixmSecurity.com. That's PIXM security.com.
And we're going to, of course, make sure we have links to everything here in our show notes. Now, Chris, let's talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can support our staff with all of this. You had mentioned a few things, not clicking on links, multi-factor. How can a technology department really start that professional development to make sure that students, staff, administrators, we're not clicking on those things? So many of us, it just seems so logical. You see something that doesn't make any sense, get rid of it. Usually if I see, hey, Best Buy is giving you $25,000, I click on the email and realize it's like best.bye@gmail.
Right.
You don't click on those things. But as you mentioned, this happens every single day. And these emails sometimes for the untrained eye are too good to be true, or they look like your bank, or they look like they're coming from your principal. How can we really do our best to train our user group that we're responsible for as tech leaders?
I think from a training perspective, you have to prioritize. Some of the biggest districts in the country will have upwards of 10,000 staff members, for example. And the law of large numbers is unfortunately not on our side. So I think it's really important that we identify high priority staff. So who are high priority staff, right? We talked about who are the staff members that have access to the most sensitive digital assets, right? And we should also think about the staff members that are sending out regular communications to the whole school or maybe to other administrators. Think about the head, like a payroll official, someone who's sending out pay stubs or sending out PDFs every month to folks. Why do you want to focus on those people? Because if they're compromised, if someone gets access to their email account, they can then hijack those accounts and use them to send out malicious malware, right? They can make other people, they can very easily move laterally. They can infect computers with ransomware. They can drive very bad outcomes from that. So it's super important that we identify and prioritize like who those key staff members are. And when you got to do some kind of an awareness campaign. This isn't an expertise that our company particularly has because we're much more on the technology side. But focus your awareness on those people. Also, the other thing I mentioned earlier was multi-factor authentication. It's not perfect, but it makes the adversary's job a lot harder because it means that not only do they have to steal a password, they also have to steal a two-factor code. So it makes the adversary's life a lot harder. But I think that particularly for large districts, there's only so many hours of the day, right? So if we have staff members that are going to be compromised, we want to make sure that they're not the ones that have the access. Of course, in a perfect world, nobody clicks. And everybody watches their training education videos, but I think prioritizing staff based on who has access and who sends out regular communications is super important.
And these types of defensive tactics by a school district is not just being proactive. There's actually a cost saving to this. I mean, I've talked to other superintendents who mentioned just by using multi-factor, their cyber insurance, maybe I'm saying this, not like their cyber insurance bill dropped by $2 million because of turning on some of these defense mechanisms. What are some of the other settings or what are some of the best practices that you recommend to school districts to make sure that things are turned on or at least being as safe as possible?
Well, we talked about multi-factor authentication. It's not perfect, but it's critical to have that set up. Certainly for important administrators, prioritizing staff, extra awareness efforts. We're an AI company, right? Right now, AI is driving a lot of advantages for the adversaries. Unfortunately, right? They can use generative AI to craft spear phishing, that's targeted phishing attacks towards district administrators. So we're on the other side of that equation, right? We're trying to use AI that can help people there at the last line of defense. And the cool thing about a product like ours is that it's just effortless to deploy. The end users don't require any training, and it can just stop attacks in their tracks. If there's budget, let's also invest in other products, right? We can invest in email security products. Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection has a very good reputation. I think it has products like SafeLinks as well that use threat intelligence to try and track down phishing attacks as they arrive in the inbox. But the beautiful thing about having protection tool in the browser is that, phishing today and the cyber attack landscape is it's not just coming in through our email, right? It's about all the different platforms that students and staff are using, right? So schools are using not just email, right? They're using Slack, they're using encrypted apps like WhatsApp, they're using LinkedIn, they're using all kinds of different channels to communicate with each other. So it's really important to think about not just email security, but also browser-based security, so that if somebody clicks on a link in Facebook Messenger or Instagram, and believe me, students are finding ways to use these apps even though they're forbidden, they can be protected if they have a solution that's in their browser instead of just focusing on the mailbox, if that makes sense.
It does. Chris, you had mentioned a couple of times this idea of hijacking an email address. How do I know if that has happened? Do I look in my send and suddenly there's hundreds of messages that I clearly didn't send, or are they just using the actual email? How do I know if my account's been compromised?
Yeah, I think if your send folder has a bunch of emails that you don't recognize, that's probably a telltale sign. If you yourself lose access to your account and you didn't change your password, that could also be a telltale sign. If you're getting an email from your payroll administrator or your chief of HR that doesn't make sense, or maybe someone who's impersonating the headmaster or a financial officer, call them on the phone, right? That's your next best alternative, just to make sure if they're asking you to take some kind of urgent action by email, just call them on the phone, make sure it's really them. Certainly for the recipients of these emails, right? They can always do that to check.
Would you be able to, without giving away personal information or detailed information, maybe share a story? You worked with all of these school districts, large and small. Could you share some story of, I'll say, unfortunate, right? This happened to a school district and this is how they needed to solve it, or this was you don't have to give the name of anything, of course, but help us really understand what this looks like in real time, in real life.
So we're on the prevention side of the equation.
Mm.
So it means that if we observe something that goes down, fortunately, this district was protected from it, right? So I can tell stories about, hey, we saved the day, and if it weren't for us, this thing would have happened. So an example of that is within the first several business days of deploying our browser extension, we had multi-factor phishing campaigns that were stopped that were targeting the chief of HR, the head of payroll, and another finance admin, like literally within the first 3 business days that we deployed within a district. So if you just work backwards, right, if our browser extension hadn't stopped these things, those accounts would likely have been compromised. And from there, the adversaries, the hackers who would have taken over their email accounts, let's say that the chief of, the chief financial officer got compromised, they send out PDFs every month to other staff members. Right, so that hacker could use that email address then to send out malicious. They could encode those PDFs with ransomware, for example. That could be something that's very dangerous. If you look at real events that have happened at school districts, ones where we're not deployed, we're not involved with these. But if you want to understand what are some of the outcomes that can happen, these schools have, like I mentioned, very sensitive. It's healthcare data, right? You have everything from psychiatric records, sexual assault history, suspension records, social security numbers. You have this aggregated over many, many students. There's been cases where data like that has gotten accessed, stolen. And what happens, the hackers then charge a price to the schools. If they don't pay the price, then they're going to leak and steal the records. One of the school districts refused to pay the price, and all of those records got leaked out. That's one example. That data, by the way, also included a lot of student identities. And just what does that mean, right? It's counterintuitive, right? We think that identity theft is a problem for people that have a lot of assets. But actually, because students have no assets, people can steal student identities, and they can use that to open up credit cards, rack up a lot of debt. And because the students are so young, they don't even find out about it for many years. So you have these cases where you have hundreds of student identities that have gotten stolen. And that's just something they have to deal with throughout their whole lives, right? And it might be many years before they can really come to terms with that or even begin to deal with it, because they don't have any purchasing history, they don't have any assets. But it's like they have a sword hanging over their head, right? Because one day they can get a call and it's like, oh, somebody bought a boat using your identity, right? So it's just kind of a nightmare. And I feel like there's very few mechanisms even in place to deal with that after the fact. And again, this is not something that we've been involved with, right? We are on the prevention side. But when these outcomes do happen, unfortunately, the consequences are really pretty brutal for the students that are compromised and for the schools. Like school security plans, like what does a school do in the event of a shooting, right? They've all got plans in place, right? That's super sensitive information. Those are also the kinds of things that can be stolen in these sorts of data breaches.
You had mentioned in that example, they were going after the chief financial officer. Is there any advice that you have as far as keeping that information? I would assume that most school districts have email addresses for their top people right on their website. Is that a good practice? And I'll follow that up with, should you create an email that says finance officer at school district, or should it be Cleveland C at school district? What advice do you have for setting up these accounts for, again, your top people that are basically holding a chair as opposed to they're just Jeff the teacher?
I agree with everything you just said, right? It's like, hey, why not make this not so obvious on the website? The bad news is the hackers' jobs are getting so much easier because of technology. It's like AI, it's so wonderful, right? And I believe it is wonderful, but unfortunately, you can now crawl school websites. You can pull down that email information, and even if we try to be clever about it and kind of obfuscate it in certain ways, you could even make an image of it and not actually have the text. AI can use computer vision and figure out what that email address is, right? Or it can just try a bunch of different combinations. It gets even worse. I mean, they can go onto LinkedIn. They can find out information about let's say we're talking about the chief of payroll. They can actually go on their LinkedIn, look at their contacts. Hey, what have they done in their careers? And they can craft a targeted email. Human's not even doing it. Like a human is prompting an agent to go do that. So now these emails and these threat vectors, whether it comes in through email or whether it comes in, it could be a LinkedIn message, right? They can become so compelling. I'm not giving you any good news there, but yes, I think everything you've said is common sense. Let's do what we can to make the adversary's job harder. Don't advertise these emails on websites. Don't make it so easy. But I think you really got to make sure that anybody who's got communications with the school district or anybody who has sensitive access, make sure they get trained. Yeah. It's like learning to drive a car, right? We invest a lot of effort and time, in how to operate a vehicle because they have a lot of kinetic energy when they're in motion. They can kill people, right? So when you have access to sensitive digital assets for all of these students, it's also a ton of responsibility. So you need to be, we really need to invest in those kinds of awareness efforts.
And these are the things that you don't think about. I've had the opportunity in my career to do numerous school website projects. And in the last couple projects that I've done, because of these reasons, I partnered up with a web company that instead of putting, here's Jeff, here's the email, here's the teacher, click here, and it opens up a contact form, some kind of a third blocker in there, just to make sure that we were being as safe as possible. I want to ask another question here about professional development, right? Now, you had mentioned going to these different conventions. Where can technology specialists, superintendents, where can these people go to learn more information? Where are the major communities that are out there? How can we get onto those types of community chats and groups? So that way, all the important information is coming to us. Where do you suggest we look?
There's a lot of great online education programs. Cybrary, for example, is a online cybersecurity educational program. They're a portfolio company of one of our lead investors. They have wonderful free courses. They have paid for courses as well, where you can actually get real degrees. And the wonderful thing is you don't have to go anywhere, right? But you'll also find information there about how to get, for example, connected to maybe a more local or regional community. So that's a really good resource. YouTube itself has got a lot of great educational content on cybersecurity. MIT for many years has had all of their STEM content freely available, and they have some really, if you want to go hardcore, you can go take an MIT class in cybersecurity. So there's a lot of really good free content out there, and it really depends on where you live, right? But in your community, there probably are people out there who are Maybe they're a chief information officer, chief information security officer. Maybe they're a chief technology officer. Sometimes for small companies, security comes down to the CTO as well. Those are the kinds of people that you could seek out to maybe learn more.
We're going to make sure that we have all of those links. We just put down on our show notes here for cybrary.it. And then we also found the link here for the MIT courses. Lots of stuff. We're going to make sure that we keep all this stuff up to date. If you guys have any questions out there, please feel free to reach into the show. You can find information over at teachercast.net/contact. Would love to get you guys in touch with Chris. And if you have any questions about that, maybe we can get your school on a show with Chris. We can continue this conversation. There's so many things here. Now, I got to ask you, Chris, a couple last things. You keep calling yourself an AI company. Is that different than calling yourself a cybersecurity company that deals with or through AI? I mean, do you really look at yourself as AI first and, oh, by the way, we do cybersecurity? Or how do you see that definition of what you actually do?
I think that's a great question. I think we're a combination of AI researchers and cybersecurity pioneers. So some of our investors and advisors really helped build what we call the cybersecurity industry in the United States. My own background personally is more on machine learning, like I said, and computer vision, particularly. That's software that can see. It's the same kind of software that's making, robo-taxis in a few years possible, right? It's cameras that can identify objects in pixels. So I personally am very passionate about how AI can be used to create positive outcomes in the world, to make life a little bit better. And, I'm kind of this generation, probably like you, where we're sort of raised a little bit by the internet. Like we've gotten so much value from it. There's so much, it's kind of like uncle in some sense. We're sort of the social media generation, the Google generation, what have you, and now it's ChatGPT. But of course, there's also a whole dark underbelly to it, right? And there's a whole criminal industry that's taking advantage of people and taking advantage of organizations and districts, right? So, to me, I'm very excited about using this kind of technology just to make the internet a little bit safer, right? That would be a wonderful outcome. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question super directly, but yes, we are squarely a cybersecurity company. We serve security stakeholders across all kinds of verticals and organizations. We protect users from links that they click on, and we discover we're the first company to discover the threats, and we protect our users. So we're also a bit of a threat intelligence company. But our mission is about stopping phishing attacks with great and effortless technology. So I love AI. It's where I come from, but this is very much a cybersecurity company. But I would say it's both an AI and cybersecurity company at the end of the day.
And finally here, Chris, walk us through the process. I'm a technology director. I reach out over at Pixm Security, PIXMsecurity.com. You and I sit down to have a conversation to get started. What are some of the things that I need to have ready for that conversation? What are some of the things that you're going to be asking me about to make sure that we're a good fit? Do you fit every school district? And then once we make that business decision, what do I actually get? You keep mentioning like there's a Chrome extension and stuff, but yeah, what does a company, what does a school district actually get from your company that says, I'm ready to go? It's all software. It's all online, right? Like it's all there. Walk us through that initial intro conversation. How does it work? What do I need? Help me make those decisions.
There is a free trial button on our website, pixmsecurity.com. You can fill out a form. It asks for a name and an email address, prove that you're a school district from the email address, and that'll be good enough to get started on a free trial. And we can help set it up, but it's also self-serve, very easy. We work very hard to make our products super easy to use. We've had districts roll this out to, we've done districts over 100,000 students and staff, and it takes minutes to actually push it out. We can push out directly through Google Workspace. We can deploy directly onto as many devices as you want in a matter of minutes. We have folks who can help with that. Some districts have staff members who will know exactly what to do, but we can get people going on this in a matter of minutes and get them protected.
And without going too detailed, what kind of a financial package do we have here? I'm assuming it's paid per student and staff member. What kind of a budget should a school district be thinking about when having these conversations?
We work in a market that we know is very price sensitive. And of course, specifics are going to depend on like the size of the school, how many students and staff are there. It might be a little bit different depending on how many staff versus how many students. It's hard to give away pricing information right here, but we obviously work in a market that we know can't afford typical cybersecurity products. We try and deliver, close to 100% of the value of your traditional cyber vendors at like 10% the price. Mm-hmm. So we're really passionate about serving this market at a price point that they can manage, and also a market that typically doesn't have the staff and resources to manage a lot of cybersecurity infrastructure. We just try to make something that's super easy and frictionless to deploy.
And then last question on this subject, if I was going to be reaching out to you, what else do I need to be thinking about as far as third-party companies? Am I looking at Pixm as a solution, and I also need cybersecurity insurance? And are there other companies outside of your realm that kind of work together, or is Pixm everything that I need?
We'd recommend a multi-pronged approach, right? For example, multi-factor authentication, there's a company called Identity Automation that provides multi-factor solutions for K through 12 specifically. We also partner with them, and they also provide a white label version of our own solution. You can work with companies like KnowBe4 Security. They will provide training and awareness programs, right? So when we talk about identifying those key staff members, like, hey, who's my head of HR, or who's my sending out payroll each month, or who are my vice principals that are really important, you can have concentrated awareness efforts from a company like KnowBe4. So we would never say to use only one solution. You probably want to use, it depends on budget, right? But I would encourage multiple solutions, right? Part of that is going to be awareness and education. Part of that is going to be making your browsers more secure. Part of that, another piece I would definitely recommend is that multi-factor authentication piece.
And everything that Chris just mentioned, we are making sure that we have links in our show notes. Definitely check everything out over on teachercast.net/podcast. Everything is going to be here. Chris, look, I would love to invite you back on this show, especially when, now that we're coming into the summertime. There's a lot of stuff on this subject that I'm sure that we could spend another hour talking about. Where can we go to learn more information? Share with us your website and socials one more time.
Absolutely. So you can go to our website, sign up for a free trial at pixmsecurity.com. That's PIXM security.com. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about our research and some of the data about how attackers are targeting schools and what schools can do to protect themselves, we write about that in our blog. So if you just click on About and go to our blog, you can see some of the details there about what adversaries today are doing to target our school districts and what you can maybe do to stop them.
For more information, check out everything over again at pixmsecurity.com, PIXMsecurity.com. And one last time, we're going to make sure that we have all the links over in our show notes on TeacherCast. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an amazing conversation. I hope everybody out there listening has learned a little bit of something about this, and that you guys are taking those steps to have those conversations in your classrooms and in central office to make sure that everybody is safe and secure. Chris, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It was a pleasure.
And I hope you guys had a great opportunity to learn a little bit about this today. Don't forget, head on over to teachercast.net/podcast for this and all of our episodes. And of course, hit that like and subscribe button and share this with your personal learning networks. And on behalf of Chris and everybody here on TeacherCast, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Jeff Bradbury. On behalf of everybody here, keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.
You've been listening to the TeacherCast Educational Network, hosted by Jeff Bradbury. Please reach out to the show with all of your questions on Twitter @TeacherCast or online at www.teachercast.net. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And please take a moment to write a review in the App Store.